In 1997, I had already been in the show in Rent on Broadway for about a year at that point. Rob Weisbach, who had his own imprint at a publishing company, was publishing the Rent Bible. It's the big coffee table Rent book that has incredible pictures, and it's an oral history of the creation of the show. And he and I were sort of becoming friendly, and he started talking to me and asking me if I'd ever thought about writing anything on my own. And I have written since I was a little kid, but I hadn't tried to write a book at all since that time. And we just started talking, and he started to share that his father had died of cancer. I was talking about my mother at the time. She was still alive when we first started talking, but she was very ill. And he asked me if I would consider writing about that experience of living through my mother's cancer and what seemed like was going to be her impending death. And then soon after we started talking about that, she did, in fact, pass away. And so I started to make attempts, and I didn't really keep a journal. I started to just sort of write almost like articles about it, and I would show them to Rob, and he would say, you know what, this is not quite right. It feels too much like a report and not enough like a real first person narrative. It was a real challenge to kind of find the, I don't know, the memoir voice. First, I was sort of hamstrung by this notion that I had to be kind of like reporting on facts, which is certainly part of, I think, what it is to write a memoir. Is you're trying to capture the truth of moments, but I think there's also an opportunity to create prose, almost like writing a novel in a way. For me, the greatest challenge of writing this book was reliving the moments, especially the most difficult moments. I mean, the book is sort of filled with very intense, emotional, difficult moments. And my point of view was that I had to relive them because I wanted to really capture the fullest extent of the moment to moment experience of going through those things. And to do that, I really needed to almost live through them again. And that was really intimidating. I mean, there were times when I would just be unable to do that. And most of the years spent writing the book were actually spent not writing, avoiding writing, thinking about writing. I would take extensive notes and then sort of stall out, and then I would sort of write little bursts and then go away from it for a while and then come back and then sort of rework these moments. And sometimes I would just sort of obsessively stay in a chapter for a very long time. But then when all was said and done, like after literally years of sort of pounding my head against the wall, trying to just get through a draft, at the end of the process, there was probably about a third of it left. And in about a 2 week period, it just all poured out all of a sudden. I wish I could pinpoint why, because in the future when I'm writing, if I get a block, I could pinpoint to, oh, that's what solved it. There was no thing that happened. It just sort of like the clouds lifted, and suddenly there it was, and it was done. And the reward was the most soul relief I've ever felt in my entire life. I made a pledge when I was writing this book to just be as brutally honest as I could about every aspect of what it was like to go through these things. Especially from my mind, there's precious little written about all the effects of grief and loss. And in our culture, I think grief is mostly thought of as something to get over and get past. And I sort of beg to differ. And one of the cases I wanted to make with the book was that we're all human and that there's a lot that can happen in that time. And it's a very chaotic, inarticulate, upsetting, deeply traumatizing, and all of those things. And in those moments, myself and others that I've talked to who've gone through great loss sometimes have done things that were very unhealthy and unappealing and unattractive and destructive. And it's very important to be able to own all those things as well as the sweetness and light in human beings. So it never really occurred to me that there was anything that I shouldn't share of my own life. I mean, I had to be somewhat mindful of, I talk about other people's intimate lives, and I did change some names just to protect their identity at their request. And for better or for worse, I've always sort of approached my public life as having nothing to hide. Being cast as Mark in Rent, which was now over 11 years ago that the workshop happened, which is almost a third of my life. I mean, my life is totally transformed in the wake of it. And in some ways, certainly professionally, I've had opportunities I wouldn't otherwise have had, and I have great friendships that I wouldn't otherwise have had. And there's something very profoundly affecting about being a part of something that's so respected and powerful and has made a difference in people's lives. At least for me, that makes it all the sweeter. I mean, that goes beyond any kind of box office success.